This is Adam Watson.
Levon Baker.
You're listening to the Darkslinger Mafia podcast. And tonight, as promised on last week's episode, we have Sam Quinton, who currently has a Kickstarter up for the Still Road Exotic Weapons for the 5th edition. Previous guest, returning tonight. How's it going?
Hey, it's always good to be here, guys.
All right, well, we're happy to have you. So your campaign is kicking a lot of ass right now. At the recording of this, you have 17 days to go. You have 135 backers, which is very impressive. And you're currently sitting at $2,346 of a $1,000 goal. So, tell us, how you getting that many backers?
Well, we did a lot of legwork leading up to it. And it follows into basically a couple different things that we've been doing. One, our previous campaigns, everything that I put together, I did to the best of my ability. Mm-hmm. And, which isn't to say it was perfect. It was just the best I could do on each book, and I got a little better each time. And I made sure all my backers were fulfilled. Because, backer retention from project to project is something I think that people need to really take into consideration and weigh. So do your absolute best every time.
Absolutely.
People are going to appreciate it. We started teasing out promotional art several months ago.
Uh-huh.
It's just little teases of some weapons. Particularly, we focused on the Kwando, on the Iklua. We did a little bit with the Tessin and the Tatawea, and I just mangled that pronunciation, but it's a war club. We've been doing that and letting people in the RPG community through my blog and through Twitter and Instagram and Facebook get a feel for that imminent arrival. And then, of course, after Comet of Echo Rock fulfilled, I went ahead and also told the backers there, I said, I've got this coming out, and so if this is something that sounds good, this is what it is. We kept the description of it very, very simple, very direct, and we made the Kickstarter as simple to understand and as user-friendly as we could, and built the absolute best value possible that we could. So when we launched, one thing that people told me I was insane for doing was we took and we did a early backer reward tier for the first 3 days for that first weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Or the PDF and on-demand codes, and we had a huge response to that because that's just a ridiculously low backer tier for 100 pages of illustrated weapons plus all the accompanying narrative text and all the other stuff that goes into the book. It's a really hefty little thing. Mm-hmm. So people responded well to it, and I think it caught a lot of attention.
So,
and then finally we got our.
So, I've been looking through this, and I looked it over briefly when you first launched. I tried to back as quick as I could. For those of us who don't play RPGs, as you know, I have yet to play my first one. What exactly do the weapons do when you're playing RPGs?
I'm working on that. I'm hoping we'll get you to play one sometime.
Well, maybe when I'm in Kentucky for a horror show, probably in 2019, I'll let you convince me to play one with you.
Cool. I think we can do that. And if you're coming for a horror show in Kentucky, you'll probably be running into a couple of our artists too. So.
Oh, very nice.
But with the RPG thing, these weapons, the stats are along the lines of the 5th edition for what is presently the world's most popular role-playing game. And what this affords the players the option to expand their arsenal beyond the typical European Tolkien-esque theater and pick up some authenticity with regard to the native weapons. We originally developed the product list, the actual weapon list, with an eye for creating things that hadn't been done. Since then, we found that I think other party or other expansions that we hadn't identified earlier, but the actual content that we have is wholly unique and entirely original. It's the statistics on the physics of the weapon, the history of the weapon. And a lot of these I base them on the experience I've had with the weapon or with the experience friends of mine have with the weapon. So that's part and parcel of having a lot of experience in the martial arts community.
Mm-hmm.
And And so that was a big advantage. And one other thing, too, and I didn't quite get to this, one of the other big things that was just an absolutely huge thing about leading to this early success is that I was fortunate enough that we had people who helped spread the word. So we had you guys, of course, helped by sharing the links, which was absolutely amazing. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
We had Ryan Burke, who did Coronary on Kickstarter. He helped us out a lot, shared that around. James Vale, who did Saucer Kala, shared it around. We had some guys on Twitter who had also created projects ranging from graphic novels, one-shot comics, people who have been doing serial comics. A lot of other Kickstarter creators who I had introduced myself to and become acquainted with, and some out there, the woodwork, and really spread the word around. Now, several of them I asked directly, please help, and they responded very nicely. It was really a great thing to see when we launched, and Twitter had, I think the count was 27 different people tweeting about the campaign launch, which was just mind-blowingly effective.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that a lot of the podcasts that you listen to on crowdfunding preach so much is mailing lists. And I myself do not have that strong of a mailing list. I think, my total social media reach is somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 10,000 people, right? And my mailing list, I think, accounts for maybe 200 of that.
Right.
And the opens aren't that great on mailing lists. I think probably like 25 to 35% of them actually get opened when I send them out. I know mailing lists did not do a ton for any of my Kickstarters, and I have got every single one of my Kickstarters funded thus far. Has that played into your strategy whatsoever?
No, I abandoned the email list after the draw Glenfollow.
Okay.
And the reason I did was because I had some concerns about the coming EU regulations, about the coming regulations in Canada.
Yeah.
And I also was hearing from people, not you yourself, but other people who were noticing that they were seeing the same thing you were, that the actual amount of emails that would be open weren't that large.
Right.
And so what I've done instead is I've just posted into my campaigns. I'm like, if you are interested, if you like what we've done here, you can follow me on Kickstarter, and then you'll see what I launch. Because I back when I back things, people see it too.
Right.
And I think that's helpful because then, like, when as some people may be interested in know, I backed a project of yours recently. It was the first project I backed of 2018, in fact. And then I backed another one. And it was nice because the people who were following, I started seeing their names pop up on the people I was following list as well, who were pledging to that too. And so I think it kind of helps as a guide for other people if they're interested in stuff you're doing, and you find something you're interested in. That's a good guideline that they're might want to check it out. And I think that's a real nice, natural way for people to find neat stuff.
Yes.
And then, of course, the other thing is I tend to plug people's stuff on my live streams during the Kickstarter. We've done 2 live streams for the Steel Road, and both of them I end up plugging other people's Kickstarters that are live.
Yeah, I really appreciate when you plugged Ghost Assassin during your last campaign. That was a very nice surprise when I tuned in and heard that.
Yeah, I got caught by James Vale. I was having a discussion with a couple of backers, and I was telling them, one of them was talking about Call of Cthulhu, and I was telling them, I said, what you really need to do is if you like horror role-playing, you need to check out James Vale, because he's a role-playing game designer genius. And I looked over, and James's name had just popped up in the audience. I was like, well, James is here now, so I'm busted being a fanboy. But that was okay. You got to give credit where credit is due. And if people in the audience are role-playing game fans and like horror role-playing, you cannot go wrong with James Vale's Saucer Kala. It is a brilliant piece of game design, a brilliant piece of setting, and some really dark art. It's brilliant.
That sounds like it's right up my alley, actually. So
definitely.
I think you can get a kick out of it. It's simply amazing. You can get it in PDF at a really great rate right now on drivethrurpg.com.
Okay.
So it's,
And what was the name one more time?
pick it up. What?
What was the name one more time?
Zas or Kala. It's XASIRKALLA, I believe, and it's under James Vale and Tremendous Studios.
Okay.
He's a really great guy, heavy metal fan, real friendly fellow to talk with. Yeah, if you pick it up, tell him I sent you.
Will do.
He won't be surprised.
Yeah, that sounds like something that our audience would be particularly interested in. After all, this show is called Mafia, so
Yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, I mean, stuff like that is important. We try. One of the guys who was on this live stream for us last week was saying it's kind of weird. We come on the live stream and we end up talking about different games and different stuff. And it's like, yeah, because you can't sit here and have anything entertaining going on when you're trying to push product on people.
Right.
Just hang out and talk, and if you got questions, we'll answer them. I mean, we're not insurance salesmen. We're not car. I mean, I guess some of us are insurance salesmen. I'm not, but we're not. Check out the Kickstarter if you like it. Cool. I mean, if not, we're on the live stream. Have fun, ask questions, and
hang
out with us for a while. And it's really cool. Like the first one though we did on launch, we ended up live streaming for like 6 hours.
Oh wow!
Because everyone was busy talking and hanging out, and just time got away from everybody. And then we did like 3 hours on the second one. We got another one we're going to try and do on Thursday. Kind of make it a weekly anniversary thing if we can, depending on our schedules. Just to touch base and bring other backers in, because we're really hoping to reach that $10,000 stretch goal.
Mm-hmm.
Because it brings in Russell Zimmerman, who wrote a couple of Shadowrun novels, Shaken and Neat.
Okay.
Which are both in just, oh man, they're so good. I like Shadowrun. It's a role-playing game. It's really nice. And if you had told me a year ago that Russell Zimmerman might be contributing fiction to a book I wrote, I would have called you insane. And now I'm sitting here just working my tail off trying to introduce as many people as I can so that we can meet that stretch goal. Because that's, I think, is the one that really catches my interest the absolute most, because it would be just an incredible experience to get it there. And we can make it in time allotted. We just need to keep expanding our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully we contribute to that in at least some small fashion. So.
Well, yeah, here's hoping. But let's also make sure that people know that it's one Kickstarter, and there's a lot of people involved, but there's also a lot of creators out there. I mean,
right.
Let's face it. You've been doing this longer than I have, and you put out some amazing stuff.
Thank you.
I mean, Ghost Assassin. Yeah, I mean, Ghost Assassin is genius.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love to look at it, and I'm not going to turn it into a mutual admiration interview. I won't do that to you. It's just really cool. It's just really cool. Brian Palmiotti. I keep mispronouncing his name. He has this La Muerta project on right now.
Oh, Brian Paluto.
Yeah, I mean, the art on that is just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, so Brian Paluto's colorist that he uses for most of his stuff, CC De La Cruz, she is the colorist of all of the Ghost Assassin covers, and she colored the story that's called Ghost Assassin in the Cards, which is the first half of issue number 2. And hopefully I'll keep her on to color everything else. That's my hope. Ghost Assassin in the Cards was her first professional gig, and now she's working for Brian Paluto doing all the coloring on Lady Death, and I believe that she does it on his other graphic novels as well, but I know for a fact she's one of the main colorists on Lady Death.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool just kind of having that connection with Brian Paluto, Beyond and besides being Facebook friends, we have that connection too. So.
Yeah, it's pretty nifty, man. I mean, the art that Kickstarter looks gorgeous, and it's nice to be able to reach out and try and help some folks out. So, like, I've got one of the artists I work with, Jacob Choya, is going to be launching his very first Kickstarter here in a few weeks. We don't have the final launch date yet, but it's going to be under his own label. He's launching. I'm going to help him out with the back end stuff on building the Kickstarter and some of the promotion stuff, and kind of help get him up and running. And we're going to talk about with that some of the little nuances, things that I wish people had told me. Like set up a separate email because you're going to get spammed by marketing bots.
Right.
Set that up. That's going to be kind of important.
Many.
Make sure that you have all your bank information verified a couple of weeks before you launch, so that you're not trying to do it at the last minute. That's a bad idea. Little things like that.
Right. Yeah, I was floored when I did my first 2 Kickstarters. It was before Kickstarter was really a thing, right? And then my third one was when Kickstarter was kind of getting known. And then in between my third and fourth is when like the potato salad thing happened that really put Kickstarter on everybody's radar. You all of a sudden have like your grandparents saying things about Kickstarter, right? And so when I did my fourth one, Kickstarter is more of like a giant size thing. And I do this really little Kickstarter, just kickstarting a pint glass for the Chronicles von Helsing series. And it was like 20 spam messages a day with that, and that floored me. Because, it had always been a thing with the other campaigns. I get maybe 1 or 2 throughout the whole entire campaign, and generally they were spam from printers who were just looking to drum up some business, right? But when I did the fourth one and then the fifth one, it was just spam after spam after spam, So it's crazy.
Yeah, so if you are looking to become a creator on Kickstarter, set up a new email address, because you're going to want to keep it apart from the stuff that you get your letters from your mother in and the stuff your bills come in, because it's going to get hit. It's going to get hit hard.
Right.
So,
yeah, it absolutely will.
Just, I wish I had known that in advance, but it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's still a great platform, so you can't argue with that. So.
No, I can't argue with success. That's for sure.
No. Now, have you ever done any crowdfunding outside of Kickstarter? Have you tried any of the other platforms?
I have. I haven't had any success.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to Indiegogo, I think, for a couple of projects in 2019. And it's not to say anything bad about Indiegogo, but I don't have a following there.
Right.
But I've been really fortunate that I have a lot of backers who have sent me messages, and they've flat out told me, they said, we like what you do, and we're going to keep looking at your projects. And, as a creator, that's an amazing thing to see.
Absolutely.
The tarot events, is, particularly as a series, it's really great, because if you're planning, like I am, 22 books in the series, you want to make sure your backers are interested, that you're putting it together. Although this next one, later this year when we launch Death Comes to Glenfollow, that book is shaping up to be really big. Really, really, really big. And there's some things I want to put together in it that I've got to work out on, where I'm going to have some printing done. But I'm excited about that too.
Well, if you need any help with that, let me know. I'm pretty much an expert at print running, as you may be aware. So
I've got to find a poster printer for 24 by 36 format.
I have those.
Okay, you are the man. I'm going to need a couple of hundred, I think. So.
Yeah, I actually have large format posters are one of the first things that I found, because I needed some banners, And you can just go with somebody who specifically does vinyl banners, but you're better off if you find a large format printer so that they can print on whatever you're going to need, like posters, that kind of stuff. So one of my printers has a large format UV printer. They can print on anything. They do it for really reasonable rate, really high quality work. This printer can print on wood, plexiglass, metal, paper, whatever you need.
Oh yeah, definitely. I need that. I need that information. That is awesome. Thanks, man.
Oh yeah. I'll make sure to pass it on to you. We're actually doing a car show for the first time ever in July. And one of the things I'm thinking about for that is I'm going to try out some wood and metal prints and see if those don't do a little bit better than just paper does,
Yeah, well, plus you can reuse them if they're not date fixed.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, and
That's really awesome.
they're not going to get damaged as easily as, rolls of paper will. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's a really cool idea. I hadn't thought about that.
But yeah, there's a car show coming up in our area that's kind of like a rat rod, mini truck, bike type show, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of my fan base fits within that group to a large degree. So it was coming up, and they were selling vendor tables, and one of my creator buddies in this area is like, you got to try this out. It's only $50. You got to try it. Blah 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 blah. I'm like, what can I reasonably expect to do there? He's like, oh, you'll easily at least quadruple the money you put out. Okay, all right. Well, that's all I need to know. So.
That's a really cool idea. I was kind of thinking about maybe trying to take 47 Furious Tales to a vendor booth at one of the big karate tournaments that I used to go to a lot.
Uh-huh.
Just not quite sure how I feel about it just yet. But I'll let you know how that works out if I get to go.
I am just, a big fan.
A lot of my fan potential.
I'm a huge fan of whatever you can do to move beyond the comic shop. Comic shops are great, but the reality is that we can't get people to go into comic shops if they don't get exposed to it somewhere else. So,
right.
To that end, like when I did the earlier editions of Ghost Assassin back in like 2006, 2007, I personally sold them in tattoo shops, tattoo conventions, antique shows, like all kinds of places that you normally don't find comics, right? And I ended up selling thousands of copies of Ghost Assassin Prelude, the 12-page book, just because I wasn't afraid to do non-conventional things, And so now, after my brief hiatus, as I'm getting back into this, I'm trying to hit up everything with that same sort of unconventionalness because it works so well for me.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I encourage everybody, whatever way you can get your comics out there, get them out there, One of my buddies...
and not just the comics either. Your RPG books are the same way.
Absolutely.
I've had some really good feedback and good experience with doing some book signings of all things in shops around Kentucky, actually.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of weird to think about doing a book signing for an RPG book.
Right.
It's been a lot of fun, and you get to hang out with people who are digging your stuff, and sign copies and talk about stuff, and people ask about what's coming next. It really is a great way to get a feel for what people are thinking about your stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely a good idea. One of my best friends who passed a few years ago did a comic that was a benefit book for cancer. And he would sign about once every 3 months at a local Pizza Hut that used to employ him. Or Domino's. It was Domino's Pizza. And he would get about $200 worth of sales every time he sat there from about 3 to 5 doing signings at a Domino's.
Holy crap.
So, there's a lot of power to just being unconventional.
You can't go wrong when you're out with the public.
Right.
It's a big fun kind of thing to do too.
Uh-huh.
Whether it's selling 5 books or 50 books, you meet people and you talk to them, and sometimes you get really lucky and you meet someone who wants to do something similar, and you get to kind of give them some information and some inspiration to get to work on it too, so that they're not waiting until they're looking back and saying, hey, I wish I would have done this. Instead, they're going ahead and saying, I'm going to do this. And they get out and they do it. And it's a really neat thing to see.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, so speaking of conventions and signings, do you have any lined up for 2018?
2018, I'm making an appearance at D20 Hobbies in Lexington for signing for the Steel Road once the backers copies have been released.
Uh-huh.
We're working on finalizing the date because of a couple of other events they've got going on. We've got to wait on a couple of product shipments to see what we can do about that. And then in Richmond, Kentucky, I'm making an appearance at Legendary Games in Richmond, which will be my first time there doing any signing stuff. But it's the city that I used to own a comic book and game store in. So it's kind of neat because there's a lot of people that I used to sell stuff to, and a lot of people I used to hang out with friends that I haven't seen in a long time. It's going to be really neat to come back. It's going to be a neat homecoming.
Nice.
Awesome. And what are the dates for those?
The same thing on there. There's a couple of products coming out from Wizards of the Coast that they've got some events lined up, and they're waiting on the product shipment to see when they can finalize the dates.
Uh-huh.
And so we're up in the air on the dates, but I'll get those to you once I have them finalized.
All right, sounds great. Yeah, I will definitely pimp them out for you. So
Same.
Great.
questions?
Outstanding. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're cool with me sharing your Kickstarter on my Instagram, I'll do that as well. I already did it on Facebook, so.
Yeah, that's incredibly cool. I love the thought of that, because anything that we can do to get more people to take a look gets us a little closer to that next stretch goal. And that's where a lot of excitement is, because it's a big jump between the $2,000 and the $10,000 stretch goal, but it's something that's doable.
Right.
And then we have extra content lined out beyond that, because the Steel Road is a project that was really needing to be done in the RPG community for this edition. The game needed some exotic weapons.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to have extra material I could put into the book if we hit certain thresholds that would make it work with the costs that were associated with it, for the extra art and stuff like that. And so it came up to be fairly high, because as you can imagine, there's 100 illustrated weapons in this, and then 6 full-page illustrations of the regions. It's all done in sketchbook style. It's all done incredibly well by Zachary Viola.
Uh-huh.
And then the full color cover. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of art in this book. And you've seen like the Nobkeri with the elephant head on it, the legendary version of it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that went into this.
Yeah, and it looks great. So, who are all the artists that are working on this one?
This was entirely done by Zachary Viola. He's been working on this for 11 months.
Okay, all right. And how many illustrations are there in it in total?
Let's see, there's 100 weapon illustrations. There are 6 regional illustrations. There's going to be 2 illustrations of the actual narrator, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
They're still under development. Should be finished here at any time. And then the cover's already done. So we're looking at, 108 at present. And with stretch goals, it adds several more. So it's we're at 108 right now.
Nice. So what went into the decision with just using one artist on this book?
A consistency with the narrative. The Steel Road is not just a weapons supplement book. There's a story that goes along with it, and starts with this guy who is telling you his tale of how his life came to be that of a wandering merchant, following the trade routes through new and unexplored areas, places that were unknown to him. And it starts when he's 16 and follows his trek into Egypt, and then all the way down into southern Africa, back up into Central Africa, across Macedonia, north of Greece into Dacia, and then down into India, around in India for a good long while, then up into China, around in China, and then over into Japan, and then eventually out into the Pacific Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And telling his story about the encounters he's had, the people he's seen, and the weapons he encountered. And thus, the weapon information came out, because his primary vocation is the trade in the weapons of war.
Okay.
And so it's meant to follow along the lines of the theme for the name of it. Changed. The name changed a few times during development, but we hit upon the Steel Road to kind of follow in line along the same thought of the Silk Road trade routes, but we went a little further. A little further than the time.
Oh, that makes total sense. I like the name. It's a really good name. So,
and we tried to use, wherever possible, we didn't give much regard to the historic time periods. We've got weapons that range, that are in use thousands of years apart, but are really important culturally in a lot of different areas. So as you get down to the southern part of Africa, for example, we've got Zulu weapons. basically, in short, it's just that we took a lot of characters that were either historically significant or that were fictitious and synonymous with the regions. From particular legends. We didn't plagiarize anyone, obviously, but we took some legend characters from cultural legends and incorporated them in some ways.
Nice.
We tried to incorporate little short, accurate little thumbnails of the history of the weapon, and go in there. So there's that odd combination of the narrative. I guess odd's probably a bad word. Intriguing is probably a more appealing word. Combination of the fictitious narrative running through it, the actual applicable weapon statistics that are running through it, and then the history of the weapon. And then in the legendary weapons, a lot of the fiction for that is written so that it can inspire adventure hooks for the people who are using the book.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Dude, definitely.
So, 47 Furious Tales is still very much planned out. Do you know about when you're going to be starting the Kickstarter for that again?
Yeah, it's going to go out probably as soon as I can finish the fulfillment on Whispers of Persephone. So, with Whispers of Persephone launching in early August and fulfilling in September, or actually, it might fulfill in August, actually. I need to double-check my calendar on that, which is, unfortunately, on my desktop at the moment. So, late August, early September, somewhere around there, giving as much time to fund as much of it out of my pocket to reduce the funding goal as I can. It's a very important project to me personally, and one I'm really anxious to share with the world. And the backers who helped, who came out and supported it the first time, are all very, very well. All the ones I've spoken to, I guess I should say, are all very interested in finally seeing it in print. And I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. Even if it requires paying it one page at a time. I'm going to do everything I can to make that book happen.
I can't wait for that book.
Because once we get book one, I think book two will be easier to fund. But it's a labor of that one is. Right.
Yeah, I think that Levon could actually be a great help with sharing that one around because the anthropomorphic animals set during the time period that is. He is very, very involved in the Ninja Turtle fan base, which might just have an interest in a book like 47 Furious Tales.
Yeah. I could definitely pass it around.
Outstanding. And we're going to definitely clean up the Kickstarter a bit because the failure of 47 Furious Tales Kickstarter is probably due in large part to me being in a hurry to get it done.
Right.
I should have taken another 3 months and given Alexia time to get some pages finished and use those in the Kickstarter rather than just examples of her existing published work.
Right.
Which was a mistake that I was still pretty new. I mean, I'm not much. I'm not as new now. Then coming off 2 successful Kickstarters, I might have been a little full of myself. Maybe just a little bit. Learn from your mistakes so you don't repeat them, right?
Exactly. But, it's only failure if you don't learn.
Right, and now I'm on Kickstarter 5 with 4 having funded. And this current one counting as 5 funded because it's going out. It's just depending on how much content we can squeeze in based on the goal we hit.
Right.
And it's exciting. It's really exciting. Steel Road is also the first source book I'm ever releasing, as opposed to just an adventure book. So there's a lot more detail going into it that's more usable across a wide variety of different people. Because rather than just being targeted for the game master, this can be used by players playing any class at all. And I think that's a neat way to expand the audience who it appeals to. I think it's showing up in our Kickstarter response.
So, is this going to be the only source book you release, or will you be doing more of these down the road?
No, actually, we're going to release on Kickstarter very shortly after Steel Road fulfills. I'll be launching Whispers of Persephone, which is probably the darkest thing I'll do for the next 12 months.
Okay.
It's a source book that's geared towards role-playing characters who are necromancer types.
Okay.
But it creates an entirely new tradition, under a whole new arcane tradition, I should say, for wizards to follow. The book is very dark. It's written for mature audiences.
Mm-hmm.
It is looking at things like why evil bad guys are always trying to ritually sacrifice people. There's game mechanics why they would. We go into a little bit into poisons, alchemicals, different neat aspects, and then there's different enchanted items in the book that are particularly intriguing. I can't wait to see what people think of the Ferryman's Coin, which is used to pay the boatman of the river Styx. It's a neat item. I'm pretty proud of engineering. So it's going to be one of those things that, if you're a role playing gamer for the 5th edition, and whether you're a game master or just a player who wants their dark arts to be dark, which is kind of the tagline on this. It's for those people who want their dark arts to be dark.
Uh-huh.
This is definitely going to be the book. And that actually, all the art in that's being done by Christian Martinez, who did work in The Draw Glenfollow. He illustrated the main goblin bad guy. He did work in Comet Over Echo Rock, where he did the black and white scenic sketches for Echo Rock, for the Glenfollow Keep. He's done a lot of work for me lately. And he's got actually 4 pieces in total in The Draw Glenfollow.
Uh-huh.
And which, if you open your copy, you'll see he does some amazing work, regardless of whether it's digital, whether it's painting, whether it's watercolor. He does really neat little model sculpting, a little bit where he customizes the miniatures and such. Just really amazingly talented, multifaceted person. And he's going to tackle this with, I was talking to him day before yesterday, and he said, this is going to put me in a dark place for the next couple of weeks. I was like, I know. So get in there with a flashlight, because, you have to find your way out when you're done. It's like, all right. So he's digging into it. And it's, to give you an idea, the interior pages are being, the background art is being illustrated so it looks like the book is bleeding out of the spine.
Oh, nice.
That's badass.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. It's for those people who want their dark art dark, and the outer edges of the page are going to have thumbprints in blood. That's what it's designed to look like. Obviously, we're not printing it in blood.
Right.
it's being colored, illustrated, and such to have that appearance. It's designed to be special. It's also the look of the exterior of the book is being done so that it's also going to be appealing for props for LARPers. Just by virtue of the way it's set up for its art.
So are you stating like
that yet?
that they could use it as? Are you stating like that they could use it as like a spell book when they're out LARPing, or what do you mean?
Yeah, because it's going to look like one.
Oh, nice,
badass.
I mean, it's gonna be in that prone demand hardcover, but the actual look of it itself is going to be such that it's definitely not going to look like any other book anyone's released. I guess more of that will come out as we get the cover art finalized. People are going to be really shocked by what they see.
All right. Well, when you're getting ready to do that Kickstarter, I want to have you back on so that we can talk more in depth about that.
Definitely.
We love dark things on this podcast. So.
Well, I think I had you at the book looks like it's bleeding out of the spine.
Yes, you very much did. You very much did. So, one of the things you were stating brought up an interesting question to me. When I write, I am extremely method to the point that, I've had friends come over and open up a coffin and ask me what I was doing inside of it. And I said, well, I need to know what it feels like when my character dies, so I'm writing. How method do you get when you write?
Not very much so physically, which is probably a good thing for Whispers of Persephone. But Whispers of Persephone has been written during a lot of alone time, and sometimes in some very dark rooms, because I had to think. I had to think about why someone would pursue something that was such an anathema to acceptable civil behavior. And there were a lot of reasons that came to mind. You could just be a lunatic and it could seem like a good idea. Or you could be just mad with the quest for power. There could be something else that was driving you that was the most important thing in the world, and it didn't matter that you didn't agree with this stuff. It was something you were going to do to achieve your goal. And all of those kind of had that underlying element of it seemed like a good idea, or there was a really good way to justify it.
Right.
And so I wanted to have something that was more, this is what we do, and there's a reason why we do it. Because if you look at role-playing games for the last 10 years or so, most of the books that were about evil and about doing evil and about the practice of dark arts, they really only allude, in general, I should say, in general they allude to people do it because they're evil or because they're psychotic.
Right.
I don't think that's really all that terribly useful as a role-playing element. No. Once you've got any degree of role-playing experience, I think that after a while, when he says, "Why would you do that?" Well, because I'm evil. Well, that works in a Justice League cartoon really well because it's funny. But for role-playing people, I think that when someone says, "Why did you ritually sacrifice 30 people?" Well, I had to pay the ferryman. I think there's an element in that lends itself well to the macabre. Mm-hmm. I think that if on the blog page that I built to host for it, it talks about a few things regarding that. One of the things that comes up is that the necromancer who created the tradition is described as having purchased forbidden knowledge from the depths of the underworld, paying for it with the blood and souls of the innocent. And I think there's something in that kind of description that hints at a reason. Right. It hints at a quest for power or some underlying motivation that can be explored in the role playing. And I like that as a narrative element. And I wanted to build on it so that people who were playing it could say, yeah, I'm doing evil stuff, but there's a reason for it. This is me doing it. I'm not going to apologize for it.
Oh, I like that.
Absolutely.
Villains are a lot more interesting when they're fully fleshed out, three-dimensional. There's nothing interesting about somebody just saying, I'm going to rob a bank because I walked into one. It's there's something interesting about somebody who went in, robbed a bank, accidentally shot a security guard to pay for their daughter's cancer treatment. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a story, exactly.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the things about Whispers of Persephone I think people are going to enjoy. Well, that and that the book looks like it's bleeding out the spine.
Yes. That would make me, gladly have it on my bookshelf. Just right there, you sold me on that. So
yeah, you open it, it's like, who bled in this book? Christian Martinez is really looking forward to that. It's going to be a little tricky on the text formatting, as I'm sure you can understand.
Oh yes,
because it's going to take away a little bit of page space. But I think it's going to be worth it for the effect.
Yeah, I think it will be too.
I'll work on the text to keep it interesting, but it's not going to be overpowering, but it's definitely going to be in that spine area and seeping out towards the text blocks. So it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I like the idea a lot.
Very cool.
I think it sounds awesome. So it looks like we have about 3 minutes left. Is there Is there anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't had a chance to cover yet?
Yeah, look for more exciting stuff from Darkslinger Comics. I know that I am.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Look for more exciting stuff also from Ryan Burke and Coronary. Definitely keep your eye on him. James Vale is a genius game designer. I know I've touched on this before. I can't overstate it. Check us out on Sonoma Publishing because we are here to stay, and we're going to be building the best stuff we can, whether it's comics, role-playing stuff, or children's books once we're finally ready to release those. And if you would, check out The Steel Road. Support it if you like it. Please share it with every role-playing game fan you know, because we really want to get those stretch goals met, particularly that second stretch goal, rather, the $10,000 one, so that we can get that fiction from Russell Zimmerman. And the current stretch goal that's met is giving every backer who backed for PDF 2 copies of the PDF, one without background so it prints cleanly on their home printer if they want to print out props, and a color background for their own personal enjoyment. And then also if they got the print-on-demand codes, they're getting 2 print-on-demand codes, one for softcover and one for hardcover.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So we will continue to be sharing this around on Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I look forward to helping you try to get to that next stretch goal. And got my fingers crossed that that's met.
I think you're going to like the idea that he has for the fiction, too. If we can just get it there to get that funded, it's going to be worth every penny.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue to do that.
3,000 words.
I'm going to make sure to spread the word in person to all my friends that I know are active role-playing game players. So
Same. I know quite a few that would probably be interested in it, and I'll definitely pass it along.
yeah, I know quite a few people. It's surprising that I've never played a role-playing game because I know so many people who do.
Right?
But
I think
it's
I
not
can
lack
see
of
the same
interest on my part. It's lack of time.
That's definitely my
I
problem.
understand completely. It's hard for me to find time to play lately.
Oh, yeah, I bet. The more you get into doing this kind of stuff, the less time you have for everything. So, you know.
Yeah, but it's been very satisfying. It's been really interesting, and I had a fun experience I'll share with you.
Okay.
I had a troll on the internet, and I don't mean that as an insult directly, but that's kind of what the dude was doing.
There are some people who are just trolls.
And he says he left a little note on one of my social media accounts. He said, "You're never going to get published anywhere." And the only thing I could do was say, "Yeah, I published 3 books in the last 12 months, so I'm not sure what you're getting at." So your argument has no validity.
Go back under your bridge.
Right?
So, but yeah, then I took one of those embarrassing stills. You got video clips of yourself, and made a little terrible meme and shared it to the Writers and Fantasy Guild group in Facebook. And then I got some really great critiques on how to build a proper meme. I'd never built one before. They're like, you need to use a different font and a different color so it stands out a little more. Easier to read.
Yeah, your meme's not going to be published in print. So.
You don't do that.
All right, well, looks like we're about out of time, so thank you very much for being on tonight. And we will be including links in the show notes. So if you want to go directly to the Kickstarter, look in the show notes. There's going to be a link that'll take you directly there. Please consider going there. And if you are unable to back, shares can help an immense amount. So please consider, at the very least, sharing it on your Facebook, Twitter, whatever social media you do. I'm Adam Watson.
Levon Baker.
Thank you for listening.